What's suspicious about that?
Do you have identification or not?
I'm a psychiatrist at the hospital across the street. I eat lunch here every single day.
I don't care if you're the president. ID now.
Is it because I'm black?
You need to leave. The words came firm and direct. No greeting, no explanation. Just an order delivered with the kind of certainty that expects immediate compliance. Dr. Marcus Webb looked up from his sandwich. He was seated at a corner table outside Riverside Cafe, a place he'd eaten lunch at least twice a week for the past 3 years. The officer standing over him wore sunglasses despite the cloud cover. His hand rested on his belt. His jaw was set. "I'm sorry," Dr. Webb said quietly. "I said you need to leave. Now." Dr. Webb placed his sandwich down carefully on the wrapper. His movements were slow, deliberate. He folded his hands on the table. "I'm having lunch. Is there a problem?" The officer shifted his weight. His nameplate read Harrison. "We've had complaints. You're making people uncomfortable. I need you to move along." Dr. Webb glanced around the outdoor seating area. 3 other tables were occupied. A couple with a stroller. 2 women with laptops. An elderly man reading a newspaper. None of them were looking in his direction. "Who complained?" Dr. Webb asked. Officer Harrison's jaw tightened. "That's not your concern. I'm asking you to leave." It was a Thursday afternoon in mid-September. The cafe sat on the edge of a commercial district in a mid-sized suburb 20 minutes outside the city center. The area had seen steady gentrification over the past decade. Renovated storefronts, new coffee shops, boutique fitness studios. The kind of neighborhood where people paid $12 for salads and walked small dogs with bandanas. Dr. Marcus Webb was 42 years old. He held a doctorate in clinical psychology with a specialization in trauma and stress disorders. For the past 8 years, he had worked as the senior consulting psychiatrist for the county's law enforcement agency. His job was to evaluate officers involved in critical incidents, conduct fitness for duty assessments, and provide therapeutic support for personnel dealing with PTSD, substance abuse, and occupational stress. He evaluated police officers. He signed off on their psychological clearances. He determined whether they were fit to carry a badge and a weapon. But sitting at that table, in jeans and a gray quarter zip, he didn't look like someone with institutional authority. He looked like someone eating a turkey sandwich on his lunch break. Officer Harrison stood with his thumbs hooked into his vest. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't aggressive. He was simply waiting. The posture communicated more than words could. This wasn't a conversation. It was compliance or consequence. Dr. Webb kept his voice even. "I come here regularly. I've never had an issue. Can you tell me specifically what the complaint is?" "You're loitering. I purchased food. I'm eating it. You've been here a while." "About 15 minutes. Officer Harrison removed his sunglasses. His eyes were cold, procedural. "Sir, I'm not going to ask again." Dr. Webb inhaled slowly. He recognized the cadence. He'd heard it in interview rooms, in recorded encounters, in case files that crossed his desk during post-incident reviews. It was the tone officers used when they'd already decided on an outcome and were simply running through the motions to justify it. He reached into his pocket. Hands on the table. Dr. Webb froze. "I'm getting my receipt." "I said hands on the table." Dr. Webb complied, both palms flat against the surface. His phone sat next to his water bottle. The half-finished sandwich rested in its paper wrapper. Officer Harrison stepped closer. "Do you have ID?" "Yes." "Show me." "You just told me to keep my hands on the table." The officer's expression didn't change. Slowly, Dr. Webb reached into his back pocket and retrieved his wallet. He opened it and removed his driver's license. He placed it on the table. Officer Harrison picked it up, examined it, then walked a few steps away to speak into his radio. The couple with the stroller left. One of the women with laptops glanced over, then looked away quickly. Officer Harrison returned to the table. He placed the license down without making eye contact. "You need to leave the area. I haven't done anything wrong. You're creating a disturbance." Dr. Webb looked at the remaining patrons. No one was disturbed. No one was even paying attention. "How am I disturbing anyone?" I've received a complaint. From who? That's not your concern. If someone has a problem with my presence, I'd like to know what it is. Officer Harrison crossed his arms. Are you refusing a lawful order? I'm asking for clarification. I've clarified. You need to leave. Dr. Webb sat still. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply remained seated. This wasn't defiance. It was a refusal to accept an unlawful command without justification. Officer Harrison keyed his radio again. I need a supervisor to my location. The air thickened. Dr. Webb could feel the shift, the moment when a casual encounter became something documented. He knew what would happen next. The second officer would arrive. They would confer. The narrative would solidify. By the time anyone reviewed this encounter, the report would describe a non-compliant individual who escalated a simple request into a confrontation. He'd read hundreds of those reports. A second patrol car pulled up to the curb. Officer Brennan stepped out. She was younger, maybe late 20s, with her hair pulled back tight. She approached the table with a neutral expression. What's the situation? She asked Harrison. Subject refuses to leave after multiple requests. Officer Brennan looked at Dr. Webb. Sir, what's going on? I'm eating lunch. I was told to leave without explanation. She glanced at the table. The sandwich, the water, the receipt tucked under the plate. How long have you been here? About 20 minutes now. And you purchased that food here? Yes. She looked at Harrison. What's the complaint? Loitering. Who called it in? Harrison hesitated. It was a verbal complaint. From staff. From a concerned citizen. Officer Brennan's eyes narrowed slightly. Is the manager here? I haven't spoken with them. She turned back to Dr. Webb. Do you mind waiting here for a moment? Not at all. She walked inside the cafe. Through the window, Dr. Webb could see her speaking with someone behind the counter. The conversation lasted less than a minute. When she came back out, her expression had changed. The manager says you're a regular. No complaints. No issues. Officer Harrison's posture stiffened. That doesn't change the complaint I received. From who? A citizen. Where are they now? He didn't answer. Officer Brennan looked at Dr. Webb. You're fine to stay. Sorry for the inconvenience. But Officer Harrison stepped forward. He was non-compliant with a lawful order. There was no lawful order, Brennan said. Her tone was careful, measured. There's no complaint, no trespass, no violation. Harrison's face flushed. I'm the responding officer. I made the determination. Based on what? He didn't answer. Dr. Webb remained silent. He watched the exchange with the trained observation of someone who spent his career analyzing behavior under stress. Harrison's breathing had quickened. His shoulders were tense. He was locked into a position he couldn't retreat from without admitting error. Brennan softened her tone. Let's just call it a misunderstanding. But Harrison wasn't done. He pointed at Dr. Webb. I want to see identification again. You already checked his ID, Brennan said. I want to run it through the system. On what grounds? Suspicious behavior. Dr. Webb finally spoke. What about my behavior is suspicious? Officer Harrison turned to him. You're evasive. You're argumentative. You match the description of someone we're looking for. What description? That's ongoing investigation information. Dr. Webb's voice remained calm. What description? Harrison didn't respond. He keyed his radio again. Dispatch. Can you run a name for wants and warrants? Officer Brennan put her hand on his shoulder. Don't do this. He shrugged her off. The elderly man at the nearby table stood up and left. The two women with laptops packed their things. Within 2 minutes, the patio was empty except for Dr. Webb and the two officers. Dispatch came back over the radio. No wants. No warrants. Record is clean. Officer Harrison stared at Dr. Webb. The silence stretched long. Finally, he said, If we get another complaint, you will be removed. He walked back to his patrol car and sat inside. He didn't leave. He just sat there, watching. Officer Brennan lingered. You're really okay to stay. I apologize for this. Dr. Webb nodded. Thank you. She returned to her vehicle and drove off. Officer Harrison remained parked at the curb. Dr. Webb looked at his sandwich. It had been sitting out for nearly 30 minutes now. He wasn't hungry anymore, but he stayed. He took another bite, then another. He drank his water slowly. He checked his phone. He responded to an email. He stayed because leaving would validate the assumption that he didn't belong. 15 minutes later, Officer Harrison finally drove away. Dr. Webb finished his lunch in silence. When he stood to leave, he gathered his trash, pushed his chair in, and walked to his car. His hands were steady. His expression was neutral. But his mind was already cataloging the encounter, the escalation pattern, the justification layering, the absence of de-escalation attempts. He sat in his car for a moment before starting the engine. Then he pulled out his phone and opened the voice memo app. September 14th, 12:47 p.m. Riverside Cafe. Officer Harrison. Badge number. He paused. He hadn't seen the badge number clearly. I'll follow up on that. He drove back to his office, a small suite in a medical building near the county offices. His assistant was at lunch. He sat at his desk and opened his laptop. He pulled up the department's internal directory and searched for Harrison. Officer Clayton Harrison. 7 years on the force. Assigned to Community Patrol, District 4. No disciplinary record in the public-facing database. Dr. Webb leaned back in his chair. He knew what came next. He could file a complaint. It would be routed through internal affairs. There would be an interview. Officer Harrison would give his version. Officer Brennan would be questioned. The cafe manager might be contacted. The incident would be classified as a citizen contact, with no sustained allegations. He'd seen it play out 100 times. But this time was different. Because this time, the person filing the complaint was the psychologist who evaluated officers for bias, excessive force, and integrity violations. He opened a new document and began typing. He recorded every detail, timestamps, dialogue, observations. He noted Harrison's body language, his escalation tactics, the absence of a legitimate complaint. He documented Officer Brennan's intervention and Harrison's refusal to disengage. Then he did something else. He accessed the department's training database. He searched for Officer Harrison's records. Bias training, completed. De-escalation certification, current. Procedural justice workshop, attended. All the boxes checked. All the requirements met. He looked at the date of Harrison's last fitness for duty evaluation. 14 months ago. Conducted by Dr. Webb's predecessor. Cleared without concerns. Dr. Webb closed the laptop. He didn't file a complaint that day. He wanted to see if this was an isolated incident or part of a pattern. He wanted to know if Officer Harrison had a history that the official record didn't show. So he waited. 3 weeks later, Dr. Webb was sitting in his office when his assistant knocked on the door. You have a call from Lieutenant Morales. Internal Affairs. Dr. Webb picked up. This is Dr. Webb. Doctor, this is Lieutenant Sarah Morales. I'm calling regarding an incident that occurred on September 14th at Riverside Cafe. We received a formal complaint from the cafe owner, and your name came up as a witness. Do you have a few minutes? Dr. Webb straightened. The owner filed a complaint? Yes. He said one of his regular customers was harassed by an officer. When he reviewed the security footage, he recognized you. He wanted to make sure we were aware. I see. Can you walk me through what happened? Dr. Webb recounted the encounter in precise detail. Lieutenant Morales listened without interrupting. When he finished, there was a pause. Doctor, I need to ask you something. Did you identify yourself as a department employee? No. Why not? I was off duty. I wasn't conducting official business. I didn't feel I should have to justify my presence based on my employment. Another pause. Understood. Can you send me your written account? I already have one prepared. Of course you do. Her tone wasn't condescending. It was resigned. Send it to my secure email. I'll be in touch. The call ended. Dr. Webb forwarded the document. Then he returned to his work. 2 days later, Lieutenant Morales called again. "Doctor, we need to conduct a formal interview. Can you come in?" "When?" "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. I'll be there." The interview took place in a windowless room on the third floor of the administrative building. Lieutenant Morales sat across from him with a digital recorder and a notepad. A second investigator, Detective Ross, sat beside her. They went through the incident again. This time they asked for specifics, exact phrasing, tone of voice, physical distance, whether Dr. Webb felt threatened. "No," he said. "I didn't feel threatened. I felt racially profiled." Lieutenant Morales set down her pen. "Can you elaborate?" "Officer Harrison approached me without cause. He ordered me to leave without justification. When I asked for clarification, he escalated. He ran my ID through the system despite having no legal basis to do so. He claimed I matched a description but couldn't provide details. The entire encounter was predicated on an assumption that I didn't belong in that space." "And you believe that assumption was based on your race?" "Yes." Detective Ross leaned forward. "Doctor, you work with officers regularly. You understand the pressures of the job. Is it possible Officer Harrison made an honest mistake?" Dr. Webb met his eyes. "An honest mistake ends when the mistake is identified. This didn't end. It escalated." The room fell quiet. Lieutenant Morales closed her notebook. "Thank you for your time, Doctor. We'll be in touch." The investigation moved slowly. Weeks passed. Dr. Webb continued his work, conducting evaluations, reviewing case files, meeting with officers in crisis. But the encounter lingered. He found himself hyper-aware of how he moved through public spaces. He noticed the glances, the second looks, the slight shifts in body language when he entered a room. He'd always noticed, but now it felt sharper. In late October, Lieutenant Morales contacted him again. "We've completed the initial investigation. I'd like to meet with you to discuss the findings." They met at a coffee shop, not the department building. She ordered an Americano and sat across from him with a folder. "This is off the record," she said. "But I thought you should know. Officer Harrison has 3 prior complaints, all involving people of color, all dismissed as unfounded or not sustained." Dr. Webb's expression didn't change. "Why were they dismissed?" "Lack of evidence. No witnesses. Conflicting accounts. And this time we have security footage. We have Officer Brennan's statement. We have the cafe manager's testimony. And we have your account." She paused. "You understand the weight your testimony carries. Because I'm a psychologist? Because you're our psychologist. You're the person who evaluates us. If you say this was racial profiling, people listen." Dr. Webb considered that. "What happens next?" "There's going to be a disciplinary hearing. Officer Harrison will have representation. You'll likely be asked to testify. And if I don't? Then it's much harder to sustain the complaint." He looked out the window. A family walked by with balloons. A man in a suit checked his phone. Normal life, uninterrupted by the slow machinery of accountability. "I'll testify," Dr. Webb said. The disciplinary hearing took place in December. It was closed to the public but documented by a court reporter. Officer Harrison sat at a table with his union representative and an attorney. Dr. Webb sat across the room with Lieutenant Morales and the department's legal counsel. The hearing officer, a retired judge named Paulson, reviewed the materials for 20 minutes before speaking. "Officer Harrison, you're here regarding a complaint of racial profiling and misconduct filed in connection with an incident on September 14th. Do you understand the allegations?" "Yes, sir." "Do you wish to make a statement?" Harrison's attorney leaned over and whispered something. Harrison nodded. "I was responding to a call about a suspicious person. I approached the individual and asked him to leave. He was uncooperative." "There was no call," Lieutenant Morales said. "Dispatch has no record of a complaint." Harrison's attorney interjected. "My client received a verbal complaint from a citizen." "Who?" The citizen didn't provide their name. Judge Paulson looked over his glasses. "Counselor, are you arguing that your client acted on an anonymous, Unverified complaint? I'm saying he acted in good faith based on the information available to him. What information? The attorney hesitated. A description. Of what? A black male, mid-40s, seated alone. The room went silent. Dr. Webb watched Officer Harrison. The officer stared straight ahead, his face impassive. Judge Paulson turned to Dr. Webb. Doctor, is that an accurate description of you? Yes. And in your professional opinion, is that a sufficient basis for a law enforcement contact? Dr. Webb chose his words carefully. A generic description without accompanying criminal behavior, threat indicators, or specific articulable facts does not constitute reasonable suspicion. It's profiling. The attorney stood. My client is a decorated officer with 7 years of service. He has completed every required training. He has no sustained complaints. Lieutenant Morales pulled out a file. He has 3 complaints, all involving people of color, all displaying similar patterns: unfounded stops, demands for ID, escalation without cause. None of those were sustained, because the complainants didn't have the institutional power to push back. Dr. Webb does. Judge Paulson raised his hand. Let's take a 15-minute recess. When they reconvened, the tone had shifted. Judge Paulson had reviewed the security footage. He'd read Officer Brennan's statement. He'd examined the dispatch logs. Officer Harrison, he said slowly, you claimed there was a call. There wasn't. You claimed Dr. Webb was loitering. He was a paying customer. You claimed he was uncooperative. The footage shows him calm and compliant. You ran his information through the system without legal justification. You continued the encounter even after Officer Brennan advised you to disengage. Harrison said nothing. This isn't a mistake. This is a pattern. And it ends now. The hearing concluded with a recommendation for suspension pending further review. Officer Clayton Harrison was placed on administrative leave in January. The internal review escalated to a formal investigation by the county's Civil Rights Division. Dr. Webb provided testimony. So did Officer Brennan. So did the cafe owner, who brought forward his own observations of Harrison's behavior in the weeks prior to the incident. In March, the findings were released. Officer Harrison had violated department policy on bias-free policing, unlawful detention, and professional conduct. The recommendation was termination. His union fought it. There was an appeal, more hearings, more testimony. In June, the appeal was denied. Officer Clayton Harrison was terminated from the police department. But that wasn't the end. In August, Dr. Marcus Webb filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against Officer Harrison and the police department. The lawsuit alleged racial profiling, unlawful detention, violation of constitutional rights, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. It also named the department for failure to supervise, failure to discipline, and maintaining policies that allowed discriminatory practices to persist. The case didn't go to trial. In November, the department settled for $680,000. The settlement included a requirement for enhanced bias training, independent oversight of complaints involving racial profiling, and quarterly reporting on officer contacts disaggregated by race. Dr. Webb didn't make a public statement. He didn't hold a press conference. He accepted the settlement and donated a portion to a legal aid organization that helped people without his resources fight similar battles. Officer Harrison appealed his termination to the State Labor Board. The appeal was denied. He filed for unemployment benefits. Those were denied as well, based on the finding of misconduct. He never worked in law enforcement again. The internal review didn't stop with Officer Harrison. Once the pattern became undeniable, the department audited his case history. They pulled every stop, every contact, every report he'd filed over 7 years. The findings were damning. Officer Harrison had initiated 43 pedestrian stops over a 3-year period. 37 of those stops involved people of color. Only 6 resulted in arrests or citations. The vast majority were classified as field interviews or welfare checks, categories that required minimal documentation and no probable cause. Of the 37 stops involving people of color, 22 individuals had filed informal complaints. Most were dismissed within 48 hours. The complaints were labeled attitude-based or misunderstanding. None triggered a formal investigation. Until Dr. Webb. The difference wasn't the behavior. The difference was the complainant. Dr. Webb had institutional knowledge. He understood the system. He knew which forms to file, which policies to cite, which legal standards applied. He knew how to document an encounter in a way that couldn't be dismissed. Most importantly, he had credibility. When a police psychologist alleges racial profiling, it's not an emotional accusation. It's a clinical assessment. The department commissioned an external review of its complaint process. The review found systemic failures. Complaints from marginalized communities were processed differently, investigated less rigorously, and sustained at lower rates than complaints from white complainants. The report recommended sweeping changes. Some were implemented. Some were delayed. Some were quietly shelved after the media attention faded. But the case of Officer Harrison became a training example. Cautionary tale. A reminder that accountability doesn't require rage or riots. Sometimes it just requires documentation and persistence. 2 years after the incident, Dr. Marcus Webb still went to Riverside Cafe for lunch. He ordered the same turkey sandwich. He sat at the same table, and he was never asked to leave. But he noticed something. Other black professionals in the area mentioned similar encounters, not at the cafe but elsewhere. The grocery store, the gym, the parking lot, always the same pattern, always the same questions, always the same assumption that they didn't belong. Some filed complaints. Most didn't, because filing a complaint requires time, energy, emotional labor, and faith in a system that rarely validates those concerns. Dr. Webb understood that now in a way he hadn't before. He'd always known the statistics. He'd always understood the theory. But theory and experience are not the same. He continued his work with the department, but something had shifted. He evaluated officers differently now. He asked different questions. He listened for different cues. He flagged concerns earlier. Some officers resented him for it. They felt he'd betrayed the profession by filing the lawsuit. Others respected him more. They saw someone who held the system accountable, including himself. Dr. Webb didn't talk about the case unless asked. When he did, he kept his tone measured. He didn't frame it as heroism. He framed it as necessity. "If this happened to me," he said once in an interview, "and I have every structural advantage, education, credentials, institutional access, imagine what happens to people without those things." That was the point. That was always the point. Officer Harrison's career was destroyed, not because of one bad decision, but because of a pattern of behavior that was ignored until it targeted someone who couldn't be ignored. The system didn't fail. The system worked exactly as designed. It just usually doesn't get documented this thoroughly.